This is the Undefeated Sports Network. Sport Court, and court is in session.
What's up, everybody? Good evening, and welcome into another episode of Sport Court right here on the Undefeated Sports Network. As always, I am Andrew Tarbill. To my left is our guy, Angelo Ace Camacho. This is Sport Court, and court is in session. What's up, Ace? How we doing tonight?
What's up, Tarbill? I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
Doing well, man. A lot of exciting news has transpired here over the last couple days. Obviously, Bears free agency has gone in a good way, from my opinion at least, and interesting to see what the moves that this team is making with Ryan Poles at the helm. I mean, he's doing exactly what we thought he would in terms of going out and getting guys that fit that younger player. The 25 to 26-year-old age is really where he's targeting, and really some good steals early on. We'll get into that here in just a few minutes, but man, how are you feeling about the free agency so far, and how this team's going to look heading into the draft?
A lot of things. Obviously, today was the start of the league year, so everything kind of became officially official,
Right.
DJ Moore, the trade with Carolina became official today. They got Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, and Nate Davis, and a couple of other guys. I guess I was thinking we'd hear a little bit more about the offensive line to this point. I know that there's been some speculation with Orlando Brown that, maybe money is too much that he's asking for, or that the league sees him one way, he sees himself as another. So I feel good about the guys that they got, but to this point, I was definitely hoping to hear a little more on the offensive line side of things.
Yeah, and just to zero in on Orlando Brown real quick, Orlando Brown Jr., Adam Schefter broke yesterday that, the discrepancy is really left tackle money versus right tackle money. And from what I understand, the Chicago Bears have offered Orlando Brown a fair deal that they believe is comparable for a right tackle. However, he views himself as a versatile player that could play either right or left, so he wants a little bit more money than what the Chicago Bears are willing to offer.
Yep.
So ultimately, I think that it's a good thing for the Bears that he's still on the market, because I do think the longer he sits out there, the more willing he would be to take a deal with a team like Chicago for, I don't want to say less money, because this guy's still going to get paid, but maybe you can close the gap a little bit more in the coming days, knowing that the clock's ticking, right? And he wants to sign a contract. So, some big news that's non-Bears related. Well,
I mean, it kind of is.
It kind of is Bears related. So, bye-bye, Aaron. Rodgers is leaving, going to the Jets. Officially announced on Pat McAfee this afternoon that he has the intention of playing for the Jets. Now it's up to the Green Bay Packers to reach a compensation package with the Jets, which obviously I believe they will do. You look at guys like Alan Lazard has signed a deal out there in New York. It's clearly apparent. It broke that Aaron has given his list of players that he would like to see come to the team, and the Jets are actively pursuing that.
Right.
It was thrown into the mix that Bill Belichick and the Patriots were interested in Rodgers, and that they flew out, I believe, to Colorado yesterday afternoon to meet with him. However, per the announcement this afternoon on McAfee, it sounds like Rodgers to the Jets is all but a done deal, and I'm excited. It's excuse me, it's an odd thing to see. For the first time in my lifetime, there will not be a Hall of Fame quarterback in Green Bay. So
Not yet. Not yet.
I don't. I
Hopefully
don't
not.
think. I don't think Jordan Love's going to be at that level. We're due for one, right?
You would think, but it'd be hard to go back to back to back Hall of Fame quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, statistically, it's almost impossible. So, I'm happy to see Aaron making the move. I only wish that he would have been able to stay around for one more season, because I do think this Bears team is progressing in a direction to where they could have beat Aaron Rodgers, Packers. And I do firmly believe that with the moves the Bears are making, they're going to be a contender for the top of the division with Detroit. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is going to retire as, dare I say, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. He's right up there in the discussions, unfortunately, but he's headed out to another division where we don't have to play him twice a year. And as a Bears fan, it's good riddance, right? Ready to see him go.
I get what you mean about wanting to see the Bears beat him, but at the end of the day, man, I think the news of him leaving the Packers is only good for the entire division. I really think that throughout this, you've seen like just the type of person he is, in terms of like, oh, everybody's talking about me. They got nothing better to do. Yet he goes on all these podcasts talking about himself and how people are talking about him. So I think he's a diva. I'm not the first person to say that, I know. And I think that I think it's only going to make the Packers more vulnerable, which to me is great because I'm tired of living in a world where Green Bay just dominates the Bears every single year. And I think last year you were kind of seeing the tides turn a little bit. I know the Bears still lost both the games, but there was definitely a difference in competitiveness in the games. And it'll be good to just be able to kind of turn the page on. It'll be good to turn the page on Aaron and the Green Bay Packers. And overall, you got to focus on your own home, right? Like the Bears need to worry about doing what they need to do, but it definitely helps that Rodgers isn't going to be there.
No, absolutely. And as you said, the Bears are focusing on themselves. Clearly here through free agency, they've made some key moves at big positions. We obviously want to see the offensive line get some help, and I do believe that will come. It's just right now, I think the focus for Ryan Poles is not overpaying for players, which is a smart strategy to take, right? Just because you have money available doesn't mean that you need to throw it around and be frivolous and give these guys outlandish contracts just to bring them here to Chicago. So I do like what the Bears have done thus far. I do think they should do more, and I do believe they will as the week progresses, but only time will tell if we get that big name in Orlando Brown Jr. We got a comment here. Do we have the best QB in the division now from Brandon Hiller?
Well, I mean, we can bring on our guest and have that discussion if you'd like.
Absolutely. Our guy, Greg Braggs from CHGO, and Braggs in the stands is joining us right now. So let's go ahead and bring him in, and we'll get his take on who the best quarterback is in the division.
Hey, how we doing, guys?
What's up, Greg? How we doing, man?
How you doing, man?
Hey, doing great. Appreciate
this man is a busy man in his life right now.
That he is.
You ain't lying, guys. You ain't lying. I'm all over the map.
He was in Indy. He's laying bricks. Then he's going and doing Purdue games, and then he's on CHGO. Like, what is this guy? He's got his own shirt now, brick by brick, man. He has built himself up, man, brick by brick, kind of like the Bears, right? We did have a comment. One of our guests comments want to know, if we have the best QB in the division, and I would definitely like your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think Jared Goff right now is the best QB in the division. But if you were to ask any of these GMs which QB would you take for the next 10 years, the answer is Justin Fields.
Right.
So it's a layered question depending on which way you want to take it. Justin certainly has the potential to be much better than Jared Goff. He's more dynamic, more athletic. He has superstar potential. Jared Goff is who he is. No disrespect. He had a solid year last year for the Lions. But Justin's still got to do some of that on the field, even though some of us feel he is completely capable of all of that. And the team around him was the reason he didn't accomplish some of those things last season. So, we're just going to have to wait and see. I mean, we're all going to write checks that the players are going to have to cash when the season comes, but and we've been wrong about some players in the past, myself included. So, but that's not going to stop me from saying that I think Justin Fields is going to have a breakout year, more so than maybe Chicago Bears might be expecting, but more so maybe surprising the national landscape.
Yeah, it's definitely. I kind of agree with that. Goff is a little more. He has a little more accomplishments. He's been to a Super Bowl. They did have a good.
I mean, he threw for like 4,000 yards.
Right. I mean, yeah, he played really well for the Lions last year. And all this news, free agency, the DJ Moore trade from the Panthers. I'm expecting big things from this offense next year, and that kind of leads us into, the next topic is the new look offense for this Bears. David Montgomery's gone. He went to the Lions, but now you got a guy in Khalil Herbert who was the number one rusher in the NFL for a while before he got hurt.
Yeah.
You got Darnell Mooney, who was shining out for Justin Fields before he was injured. Now you bring in DJ Moore. Cole Kmet, I think, has a little bit better opportunity to see the field in terms of the passing game, where he was more of a blocker earlier in the season last year. What are your expectations and hopes overall for this offense going into next season?
Well, I think they got to finish building this offensive line out. Obviously, my expectations are much higher than what they were for last season, and
Right.
and I didn't expect much going into the year. And then Justin was really the only reason that kept us excited because, man, did he just bail this team out. I mean, there was a stretch, like we all know, that they had 6 straight games where they were dropping 30 points. We've never seen that in the history of this team. Certainly in my lifetime, dropping 30 points a game, and making it look easy at times. But that was all Justin Fields, and you can't depend on that again this year. Although I think he's certainly capable of putting the team on his back because he's just so dynamic. I mean, but you also saw him start to run out of gas by the third quarter of the season. So you hope that the team around him can pick him up to where he doesn't have to do everything himself. So I think the one thing I think we all need to caution ourselves on is it's obvious that the pieces are getting better and you get DJ Moore in here and now Chase Claypool for a full season. And you hope Darnell Mooney can be healthy coming off his injury. And then, as you mentioned, Cole Kmet, maybe an underrated tight end in the league. I think he had the third most touchdowns of any tight end. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, and that's in a bad offense, right? So, I think he's capable, and we still have to get through the draft, and I guarantee they're going to get a couple guys, whether it's another tight end or another wide receiver. They're going to add to this offense still. And obviously, offensive line still needs to be addressed. So there's still some pieces we need to see, but at the end of the day, what do I think? I mean, yeah, they're ready to take the next step. And, it's going to be a more fun season watching Justin Fields actually develop from the pocket and develop as a passer and not just this athlete, because he is capable of that. I think it's unfair to criticize Justin as a running quarterback when he did that because he had to do it. It wasn't because he wanted to, or that's the only thing he knows how. Michael Vick and Lamar Jackson were running quarterbacks in college. Then they came to the league as running quarterbacks. Justin Fields was not a running quarterback in college, nor was he a running quarterback his rookie year. He only did that last year so he didn't get killed.
Right.
And how are you going to blame? You can't blame him for that or downgrade him for that. So now let's get back to what he should be doing. That's developing as a passer, which I know he wants to do. The one thing I think we all need to caution ourselves with, though, is it's going to take time to build chemistry with DJ Moore. Chase Claypool. I'm sure
Right.
they're all going to work together real hard in the summer, but you really only understand what you're going to do as a quarterback wide receiver combination when the bullets start flying in the season. So, I'm going to have expectations. I think this team can compete. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. And at the end of the day, if those things don't work, Justin Fields is going to take off and run. But I think we all just kind of got to give them a little time to make it start working.
Right. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is they only won 3 games this past season, right? So even by winning 8 games, that's a significant jump in improvement in terms of winning percentage, and I think getting DJ Moore on the team this early before the draft, him and Justin can, do what they got to do. I think it's only going to help this offense be more explosive, I think, than it already was last season.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%. Go ahead. Sorry, Tarbill.
Oh, I'm glad you pointed to that, Ace. And Greg, good point that it will take some time for that chemistry to develop. I want to know your thoughts now that David Montgomery has moved on to the Lions. Do you think that Herbert can carry the load as that number 1 back, or do you think the Bears either go after a guy like Austin Eckler in free agency, or option B would be obviously drafting someone in, I would presume, the later rounds, that round 4 to 5 sweet spot where a lot of running backs fall. What's your thoughts on Khalil, and what do you think the Bears do from here?
Yeah, I'm high on Khalil Herbert. I know everybody wants to try to say, he can't block, and I know the tape showed that he can't at times last year. And Montgomery was a much more willing blocker, but when you compare their stats running the football, Khalil Herbert was much better. So, yeah, Khalil's got to get some things cleaned up on the blocking end of things. But I think Khalil Herbert fits this offense running style more than David did, which is why they didn't bring David Montgomery back. And also the role that David Montgomery was on this team, as much as some of the most staunch David Montgomery disciples will hate to hear this, but you can find that talent somewhere in the draft. Sometimes you can even find them as undrafted free agents. The hard the hard yards, the goal line dude, the short yardage dude. And I understand he was a leader, but that's only going to get you so far as far as getting paid. This is a guy, David Montgomery, who's a solid running back. Everybody always acts like I'm like hating on this guy because I'm just trying to be honest about my assessment, but he had 200 plus carries and only had 1 carry for over 20 yards all season.
Yeah.
Only 1. If the Bears were signing a running back right now, as their cowbell running back, and we signed him and he only had 1 carry for over 20 yards, Bears fans would be pissed. They wouldn't be like, well, he's a great leader. They'd be pissed. So we'll see. Khalil Herbert's got to, figure out the blocking end and stuff, but he's a better running back as far as running the football than David is. And I do think they're going to draft a running back. Is it going to be, Bijan Robinson? I don't think so, but you never know in a trade back scenario if that's something they would consider. That'd be insane because this dude, I think, is going to be a weapon. But outside of that, I think they're going to have options to add to the running back room, later in the draft. I don't think they're going to go after Eckler anymore. They signed Travis Homer, who I think is more of a third option. I think that puts Treston Ebner in some trouble. I don't think they're looking at Travis Homer as the backup to Herbert. I think they're going to get another running back in here, and it'll be those 3. And it'll be somewhat of a running back by committee, which a lot of teams implement. That's just kind of the way the NFL now. So, but I think, Montgomery, I think he had like 6 yards per carry and, certainly could take that cutback lane and find a few more 20-yard carries than Montgomery could get, all due respect. And I think they're just looking for more explosive plays. And I think Herbert fits that role more than David Montgomery did.
Yeah, I think we as Chicago sports fans have a tendency to fall in love with the running back position just because of the history of the position. You know what I mean? And yeah, Montgomery's a good back, right? But you just don't pay running backs the kind of money that they're going to want nowadays and expect your team to be able to be really successful in getting other areas sewn up. I think a guy like Herbert proved, hey, I'll be the bell cow. I'll carry the ball for what you need. You get a backup so that he has somebody that he can, give it to take a little bit of a rest. But overall, I think they made the right decision moving on. Whether fans want to hear that or not, I think it was definitely the right move.
Yeah, and I would agree there, Ace. I do believe it was the right move to go ahead and move on from David Montgomery. It hurts a little bit, obviously, that he's going to be playing the Bears twice a year in a Lions uniform, but that's the reality of the NFL, right? That's the world that we live in, and it was a risk that you knew you were willing or you were going to take, and obviously were willing when you didn't just throw money at him to keep him here in Chicago. So obviously, a lot more areas of need on this team that are greater than running back, offensive line, defensive line. Really, we have to focus on, in my opinion, on the trenches moving forward. I would still like to see the Bears reach a deal with Orlando Brown Jr. I know there's been talks about him wanting more money and kind of valuing himself a little bit higher than what teams are valuing him at this point. Do you think that the Bears get this deal done, Braggs, or do you think they wait and go ahead and draft some offensive linemen early on? Obviously, Ryan Poles and co. were out at Northwestern yesterday watching Peter Skoronski very closely. So I'm interested to see what they do at the number 9 pick. And obviously, the rest of free agency will dictate that. But what's your feeling, Greg? You think they go really after Orlando Brown Jr., or they just leave the money on the table? If he takes the deal, great. If not, we'll draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think Orlando Brown is certainly on the table still. I mean, he hasn't been signed, and he's obviously more talented than most of the offensive linemen on our team. So you're not going to not pay attention to that. And I think the talk around the league is that the league wants him to be a lot of teams want him to be a right tackle, and he still views himself as a left tackle. So that's part of the reason why he hasn't been signed yet. So if you could convince him to come here and play right tackle, if that's what the Bears want, maybe paying him left tackle money to play right tackle, maybe he'd be willing to do that if he can't find another team that's willing to put him at left tackle. And I think it would be a great situation for the Bears because, Braxton Jones, I think, was a bright spot last year as my headset just fell off. But, I think Braxton Jones was a bright spot last year, but he's still somewhat of a question mark going into this year as far as how he's going to continue to develop and get better. So if he doesn't, continue to improve, now you have Orlando Brown sitting over here on the right side who has played the left side. And you'd be like, well, we know we promised you the right side, but get the hell over there. We need your help, and at that point, what's he going to say? No. So I think it would be a great move for the Bears. And it would get us closer to solidifying that offensive line where while there's still a lot of work to do on the defensive line, at least you've got the offensive side somewhat looking right, at least on the starting spots of the depth chart. They may not have a lot of depth behind the starters, but they'll week one that, if they can get their offensive line figured out, they'll be putting out an offense that looks pretty good on paper. Yep. And then it's just a matter of who's going to stay healthy and who they can develop and who they draft to be ready to be behind them when the inevitable injuries, come into play. So, I don't think they're done in free agency as far as offensive line is concerned. And then when we get to the draft, to your point about number 9, I'm going to just I called my shot with the Panthers thing. I've been saying it for a few months. And then when I got to the combine, from some of the reporting that I did and some of the information that I gathered, it became even more apparent that it wasn't just a prediction of what I was going to say. It was going to happen. And so I started trying to tell people that as much, whether they wanted to listen to the meatball bricklayer or not. I got it right. And I'm going to continue to call my shot with this. And they're going to trade back again from 9. I don't see any way that they won't, because the way it breaks down to me, just the same way as it did with the Panthers, what makes the most sense for the Bears? Well, the Panthers made the most sense to the Bears to me, and that's why they made the trade. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. In fact, it was a bricklayer that figured that out. So with the trade back, it's the same thing. What makes the most sense? Yeah, I mean, I get Skoronski and Tyree Wilson and Jackson Smith, all these names you want to bring up. Those sound great, But what makes the most sense for the Bears? Adding more draft picks, either this year or even in the future too. And if you're sitting at 9 and Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, Tyree Wilson, Brian Breesy, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Devin Witherspoon, those are just 6 guys I named. All 6 of those guys could be available at 9. Because if 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 8, then the other 4 there's only 4 non-quarterbacks going before 9. So now you get to 9 and you have all these players that are probably on their board of guys they're interested in. Why would you take one of them and push all your chips in on one of them to hope they work out, where you're saying any one of these guys could be good enough to play for the Bears? Let's trade back and see which one falls to us. And now we've added multiple second round picks in, the early second round, because right now we have one pick in the top 50.
Yep.
We have 4 picks in the top 64, but only 1 in the top 50. So how can we get more picks early in the second round? You trade back that 9 spot and find a team that has multiple second round picks and take them from them. That's how.
Yeah, okay, and I did say something similar earlier. Angelo and I did a show Sunday kind of recapping where we thought the Bears were going to move, and I said probably that 12 to 18 range. I could see him moving back and still getting a guy of, top tier talent. As you said, it's going to be important to build as much draft capital as we can. These Bears still have a lot of holes to fill. So
right. They need a center, maybe a guard. You need 4 defensive linemen at this point. I mean, they're but they're getting closer. I mean, the thing that's funny is, and I'm starting to fall victim of this too, so I'm not trying to just put Bears fans against the wall like I'm not part of this. When we went into the offseason, I said, they're not going to be able to fill every single hole. Like, people were like, oh, well, there's like Adam Hogue would say on CSU Bears, like, they've got so many holes. They may not compete next year, or not Hogue. Somebody might have said that, an expert, right? They've got so many holes. They're not going to be ready to compete next year. And I made the point, they don't have to fill every single hole to be competitive. There's plenty of teams that compete with a hole or 2 on their team. And I did not expect them to fill all their holes. Now, 4 days into, this all these moves Ryan Poles made, now we're like, let's get this roster filled before the draft, and I feel the same way. Like, we're so close. I feel like that, where but it's going to require them hitting on everything, which is not realistic. Not all of these guys are going to work out. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's not going to be as good as we thought they would. And that's just how things go. So, you just try to keep an open mind to those things. But the more picks you add, the better chance you have to hit on more players, and the better chance you have to compete this year. Bears fans should be wanting to compete this year, but they should also be looking at the bigger picture of everything too, and keeping an open mind. Like you said, 8 wins would be a huge jump. And for some fans, that might be a disappointment. Like, come on, guys, let's keep it in perspective here. I understand we all want to get to the playoffs. I do. I know I do more than anybody, or as much as anybody, but we have to be fair to how this is going to develop.
Absolutely. And, that kind of brings us to the next topic with all the new additions and everything. I've completely agree with your take on the draft. I think that one guy from the draft is going to come in and all of a sudden we went from a 5-win team to a 12, 13 win team is just completely unrealistic. I think you move back, you try to get, I would not be surprised if they try to get a lot more picks for next season and even the 25 season. I think realistically 24, 25 is going to be where this team's going to really be competitive. But, they bring in a couple guys, TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, Nate Davis. What are a couple, we talked about Orlando Brown Jr. What are some other areas and guys that you think that they should really be taking a look at right now in free agency? If it somebody else's player or maybe locking up one of their own players for the future.
Yeah, well, like I said, I do feel like they're close in some areas. Like, linebackers locked up now. They got Tremaine Edmonds, they got TJ Walker, and you got Jack Sanborn. All right, we're good to go there. You just Hope you can build depth behind that, but they now slide down the priority list. Secondary, could they use a corner? Sure. I think they were in on Darius Slay today. I don't know that for sure, but from reports floating around, it sounded like they were. So obviously they're interested in corner. I know this is a pretty deep cornerback draft, so don't be surprised if they draft one. But for the most part, beyond that, I think their secondary is pretty solid. They played well to end last season. So obviously it's the defensive line, right? So then that's your answer is, Corey Wooten brought up, a guy on our CHGO Bears team, Corey Wooten, obviously former defensive end of the Bears. He likes Yannick Ngakoue. And I think that would be a good solid signing, a name everyone knows, and there's a reason you know his name because he's productive and he's a good player, solid player. You know what you're getting from with him. Bring him in. Just got that defensive end, like you said. What was his name again? I'm losing track here. From what was it, Tennessee?
Yeah. I don't remember his name. Was it Nate Davis?
No, that's
the offensive
Davis
lineman,
is the guard.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, you just said it, and now I'm losing my train of thought.
DeMarcus Walker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, DeMarcus Walker. Exactly. I'm getting TJ Walker and DeMarcus Walker confused now. Yeah. So it's a lot going on. But, all right, is he a rotational piece or is he a guy that's going to be a mainstay on the defensive line? Who knows? But now you got two guys there. And depending on where you trade back or if you trade back, maybe you're drafting another one. And like I said before, do I need 4 signed free agents on the defensive line? No, I can keep an open mind. You get a couple guys, get one guy in the draft, piece together some of the guys that are already here, like Dominique Robinson, Travis Gibson. Last year I thought Jones had a solid year. So let figure it out from there. Like I said, you have linebacker, you have secondary that was pretty solid. So you're almost there, right? And they competed last year in every game with a bottom of the barrel roster. So now you bring those guys in and the calculus would be, well, they should be better, right? I mean, it doesn't guarantee you wins, but they should be better. So, and then on the other side of the ball, if we're looking at who they should pick up, obviously I think tackle is a need. And you're not going to be able to get a dynamic defensive end or a dynamic offensive lineman at the top of the draft. You're going to have to pick one or the other. And that's probably where they're going to go with it. So depending on which one they're targeting as their favorite for the first round of that draft, take the opposite of whatever you're looking at, right? If they are looking at Skoronski, fine. If they don't trade back, fine. But then get your defensive end now. Or flip it the other way. If you're looking at Tyree Wilson, fine, or Brian Breesy, fine, but get your tackle now.
Right.
I think that's that easy for me to say, but can Ryan Poles do it?
I mean, it makes sense, right? You're not going to, we've talked the whole show. You can't fill every spot with one draft or free agency, but if you address the needs of one of those lines during free agency, then you can pivot and use your entire focus for the other line during the draft. And I'm not saying you still can't draft other players in that for the opposite line, but you can get a more dominant playmaker earlier in the draft for the other line that you weren't able to address during free agency.
Yeah, absolutely. And Corey was just tweeting about him an hour ago with Yannick Ngakoue, 27 years old, has 19 and a half sacks the past 2 seasons. The Bears defensive line, I think, had 10 sacks all of last year. So, having a guy like that would be a breath of fresh air for this team. I can promise you that.
Definitely. Well, Greg, we appreciate your time as always. We know you're a busy guy, so we don't want to keep you much longer. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before you go, do you want to let everyone know where they can find and follow you and everything that you're doing?
Well, if you can find me, that means you're all over the map because that's where I'm at. I might be in Columbus, Ohio this weekend covering the NCAA tournament. I might be in New York next week if Purdue can advance to the Sweet 16. I'm obviously, like you guys, and I appreciate you guys promoting it, but with the graphics and stuff on CHGO Sports, we're selling the brick by brick shirts, which is a nod to my motto in life. And I appreciate CHGO getting behind me like that. And so CHGO Bears and CHGO Sports, subscribe to us on YouTube. We're doing shows every day, doing breaking news shows, and we're going to have great draft coverage and everything else for the NFL draft. And then for my personal stuff, Brags in the Stands, I've been doing that for years. Somewhat has pivoted into somewhat of a mostly Purdue basketball content place, just to try to keep the content separate, keep the Bears on my personal account, keep the Purdue on the Brags in the Stands. That way I'm not alienating both fan bases who probably don't want to see one or the other. So that's what a lot of the content is on there right now. So having fun with it, just trying to do as much as I can and spread my wings in this media game as wide as I can. And so it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate your guys' support and appreciate you guys inviting me on tonight. Anytime you guys want me on, I'm happy to hop on.
Awesome, Braggs. I appreciate it, man. It's awesome to see you kind of flourish in this. I know you put a lot of hard work into it. You've been great with us the whole time I've been doing the podcast thing, and I appreciate you making time for me today.
Yeah, of course, man. I know sometimes we're schedule's tough to line up, so I apologize for that. But I always try to make it work for you, and both of you guys, you do great work, and you guys keep it fun and keep the content rolling. So anytime you need anything from me, just let me know.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right. Appreciate it. Greg Braggs, ladies and gentlemen. Always such a great football mind. Greg is one of the best in the game when it comes to just his takes, his football analysis. And as you said, he's really flourished recently, especially with CHGO. Great opportunity for him there, and a lot of good content that he's putting out with the guys over there. So
yeah, man, they got all kinds of stuff. Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, Sox. They got a betting show that they have. It's really good stuff over there, and it's just kind of like blowing up, right? Like overnight they've just taken over, man, and they got great stuff, great personalities. It's really awesome to see a guy like Braggs who, you followed for a long time, I followed for a long time, even before doing all this. So it's pretty awesome to see somebody who puts so much time into this be able to get, that kind of success going forward. So
well, and that's something that's cool and humbling for us, right? Is a lot of these guys that we've followed and built relationships with over the years, getting the time to chalk it up with them and get their opinions now on our show after we've viewed them for so long. So it's really cool to have Greg on, as always. Be sure to go follow him and all the content that they're putting out at CHGO, as well as Braggs in the Stands. But man, let's get right back into it, Ace. I'm an excited Chicago Bears fan right now. I am what Greg said not to be. I am too optimistic for where this team's going to be headed.
That doesn't sound like you. No,
not at all.
Like last year before the season started, like we didn't say that the Bears would have 12 wins or anything like that. We keep it pretty fucking level here,
Yeah, right.
We don't get too crazy. No, ultimately, man, it's a good time to be a Bears fan, whether people like it or, I know I live in Wisconsin, right? So whenever I say, it's a good time to be a Bears fan, I'm excited to be a Bears fan. I always got somebody who's like, well, you say that every year and the Bears suck every year. Like, yeah, well, I do say
what else are we going to say?
Right. Like, oh man, I'm going to go into this season just fucking miserable. No, why?
No,
why?
right.
This is the biggest offseason in my lifetime as a Chicago Bears fan. You got them looking at a new property in Arlington Heights where they're going to build a new stadium. They're going to move the Chicago Bears to Arlington Heights. Yes, they're still going to be the Chicago Bears. If you've been to Soldier Field, it's not the greatest. It's a pain in the ass to get in and out of there. There's no real it's just there's a few entrances into it. It's just a big chaotic mess. They have an opportunity to build a world-class, state-of-the-art facility where you can host Bears games, you can host Sweet 16, Final Four, WrestleManias. Like, there's opportunity for this team to get so much more revenue coming in as a team, right? But then you look at an offseason where you get the number 1 overall pick by luck, right? We knew the Bears would be bad this past season. This whole season was supposed to be bad. Well, right. This whole past season was supposed to be, what does Justin Fields do?
Right.
We got lucky that Lovie Smith was told he's getting fired before the last game of the season. So he wanted to go and give the Bears a little gift before he left. They got none of this happens without having the first pick. You know what I mean? Like, if the Bears had the second pick, all this craziness, it's not even close to what it is right now.
Could the Bears have still landed DJ Moore with pick number 2?
I don't know if they would have gotten a player. I could see maybe a draft pick, but I don't know if they would have got a player for that spot. And I know it's crazy because it's just one spot difference. But at the end of the day, by getting DJ Moore, by trading that pick, you got more draft capital this year, more draft capital next year, more draft capital the year after that, and you added a piece to your team that your team sorely needed. You needed wide receiver help. You needed to get your young quarterback a true number 1 wide receiver. And obviously, he's not Devontae Adams or, Justin Jefferson, but he's a guy that's going to come in and he's going to work his ass off to help this young quarterback flourish. You give Fields DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, and Cole Kmet. And that doesn't count whoever, if they draft somebody during the draft, right? So there's no excuses right now for Justin Fields if they're able to address the offensive line that he's going to have. No excuses. Well, Justin needs to flourish and take that next step.
Well, and that's the big thing, right? Is, as you alluded, all of last season was really about the development of Justin Fields. What could he do? And obviously, as Greg said earlier in the show, we got to see him use his legs a little bit more out of not wanting to, but having to, out of necessity. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Now you've got guys like obviously DJ Moore, but then Chase Claypool is going to be a very good number 2. Darnell Mooney's going to be a very good number 3 in the slot. I don't want to say number 3 because obviously that'll be personnel based. Who's the 2 or 3, but you think about Darnell Mooney matching up against that slot corner, and that's scary when he was burning the edge off number 1 guys last season. I always go back to the game where he had that insane one-handed leaping catch that was 54 yards down the field.
Yep.
And he caught that on a number 1 defender like it was nothing. And, you got a guy like that who's now in a certain package, your third option, because you've got DJ Moore, a true bona fide one that can go up and get those 50-50 balls. And, we've talked about the definition of a number 1 receiver before. DJ Moore is a number 1 receiver on 80% of the teams in the league, I would say.
I agree.
Obviously, you go to a team like Cincinnati who's got insane depth with Jamar Chase and then T. Higgins, both true number 1 receivers.
Right.
He may not be the number 1 option there, but statistically, if DJ Moore was drafted by the Bears right now, he would have the 3rd most receiving yards in Bears history.
Right, which is crazy.
It's mind-blowing. But, who's the best receiver the Bears have ever had? Brandon Marshall? Alshon Jeffrey?
Alshon Jeffrey, probably, that they drafted. Probably him. But I think, honestly, the person I think who's going to benefit most from this besides Fields is Cole Kmet. I think if the Bears were smart, I think they would try to lock him up this offseason, because I could see a scenario where everybody is so focused on DJ Moore, Mooney, and Claypool that Cole Kmet is just going to feast, man. I feel like
he's wide open down the middle of the field.
I mean, I'm not saying maybe not wide open, but I mean, we've seen him catch some pretty crazy balls last year. The Atlanta game comes to mind where he just went up and took that ball out of the air when he got smoked at his legs.
Yes.
He proved to me last season that getting him more involved in the passing game, this guy can be a legit weapon. Right. And like I said before, if they address the offensive line, there are no excuses for Justin Fields, right? If he struggles, he won't be here next year. You know how I know? Because they have 2 number 1 picks next year. And I feel like that was intentional so that if Fields does struggle, Now you have the ammunition. We talked about this on Sunday to move
Package
up in
it
the draft.
together, trade up, get
Exactly.
you the quarterback that you want for the future.
Exactly. 100%.
And ultimately, the moves that this team is making, the moves that Ryan Poles has engineered, are still going to be valid the year next year after this season.
Yep.
DJ Moore is still going to be a number one next season unless, he has a horrible injury or something. So ultimately, you're not losing a lot by letting Justin have this year to develop. I think it was absolutely the right move for the Bears to make. And moving forward, if he does prosper, you have a franchise quarterback.
Yep.
If not, like you said, you package those two number ones and maybe, a future year number one or something, trade up into the top 4 in a quarterback class, which is anticipated to be much better than the quarterback class that's coming out this year in season's draft.
And I know you said package them to move up to around 4, but if you look at Carolina right now and look at that team, there is a real possibility that team is picking in the top 5 next year with who they have, even if they draft a quarterback.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean? Like there's a chance that the Bears and them could both have top 5 picks next year. I hope to God that the Bears pick is not top 5. But
right.
there's
I hope it's 32nd, but
yeah. Yeah, me too. But
no, realistically, I do understand what you're saying there, Ace, and that's a good point to bring up is Carolina has traded away everybody, right? Obviously, number 1 DJ Moore coming here, number 1 back in Christian McCaffrey going out to San Francisco. They are dismantling that roster to rebuild. Similar to what we saw the Bears do last season with Ryan Poles coming in and cleaning house. One thing I wanted to bring up while Greg was with us, but I didn't have the opportunity, when we were talking about guys that are high character and leaders, I think you know where I'm going with this one. The Bears did not offer Sam Mustipher any money to remain a Chicago Bear. And he is the prime example of a guy who's a great leader, a leader of men, awesome in the locker room, excellent spirit, could be your buddy, could be your best man at your wedding, just not a good enough football player. And, going back to the David Montgomery situation, obviously, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, so to speak, David Montgomery is a much better football player than Sam Mustipher, in my opinion. But, looking at that situation, he's a player that always comes to mind because so many people spoke so highly about Sam Mustipher and his leadership and what he brought to the locker room. Well, that's great. You can be the best leader of men, but if you don't have the physical talent to be a starter on the Chicago Bears or any other, well, I can't say any other team because I'm sure some team will pick Sam up, but just not the right fit for what the Bears are trying to do with this aggressive, fast, off the ball offensive line. I do truly think that Ryan Poles trades back, as I indicated with Greg there, to about the 12 to 18 range. And I think you can still get an offensive lineman like Skoronski or the kid from Ohio State. His name's eluding me right now, but there are definitely players out there. Again, this draft is going to be unique because you only have 4 quarterbacks. So that's going to push them all to the top. And I shouldn't say only. I'm sure there's, a 5 and 6 quarterback option out there that I don't know of, but the skill gap, right, is really those top 4 quarterbacks. So you look at that and look at where this team's at. Overall, I think the smart move now is leverage your position and get as many picks as possible this year, especially when you don't pick again from 9 to 64, I believe it is. That's a long wait. That's a long time to wait without a pick.
Yeah.
So if you can close that gap really where, that top 50 is, let's say from 15 to 50 is really where a lot of your blue chip starter type players land or shake out, whatever you want to say, for whatever reason, guys fall into the early second round just because of the way the board's moving and things like that. I think the Bears have to get some more picks in that area.
I agree 100%. I do think though it's a really nice change of pace, no pun intended, from the past
From
regime
Ryan
of
Pace
Ryan.
changing
Yes,
or
like
trading
I
all our
think
picks away
it,
for
or like just automatically like just throwing money at guys just
yeah,
to fill a hole that and it's nice to see that Ryan Poles
yeah,
is taking the approach where, hey, I have a limit of what I'm going to spend on these guys, and if I don't hit
right,
it or if they want too much, well then I'll go get another guy who's maybe not as good, but he's not as far off, and
right,
that's I see where Poles has been building this team for the future more than the now, and that's what you need to
right,
do as a GM. You need to watch your team and be like, okay, I don't know if this is the year that we're truly going to contend, but let's make
right.
sure that if it's not, we have the assets in the next coming years to be able to make this team what we want it to be. And that's what I feel like he's really done a great job of doing this offseason.
Oh, absolutely agree, Ace. And I think that's, as you said, the previous regime, you look at like the deals that they gave. Robert Quinn always comes to mind for me. Yes, he was the sack leader 2 years ago for the Bears before obviously being traded away last season. And, guys like Khalil Mack, all the dead cap space that was left for this new regime to work on and move on from, really. And it's an amazing thing to see what Poles has done thus far in his availability to move around and maneuver into the spots that he wants. And really, the players, you look at the two linebackers that were acquired plus a second round pick for basically the same price as what you would have had to pay Roquan Smith. That is absolutely genius work by Ryan Poles and company. And if you're able to maneuver a couple more big deals like that throughout the rest of free agency and then obviously into the draft, wheeling and dealing, this team could really be set up for the future when, the average age of all these guys he's picking up is 25 to 26 years old. So they're still relatively
Right.
young, and you still will get, 3 to 5 at minimum quality years out of these players if that's the direction you want to take.
Yep, absolutely. And it's now, we talked about the Roquan trade. Would he have made that
Yep.
trade if it was a guy that he drafted? Who knows? But lucky for us, it wasn't a guy that he drafted.
I think he would have, because at the end of the day, Roquan Smith disrespected the Bears and Ryan Poles in the media.
Yep.
Whether you want to admit it or not, obviously it comes down to dollars and cents, but who's going to want to negotiate with a guy who publicly blasts your organization?
Right.
I lost all respect for Roquan Smith after that. That's just me personally, but Ryan Poles made it work. He wanted to keep Roquan, he couldn't keep him, so look what we have now.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I was weary on what Poles was going to do after last year, there were a couple questionable signings. Just then he drafted Velus Jones, and that hasn't seemed to work out. And I kind of looks to me like they're going to probably
Velus who?
Well, it kind of looks to me like they're going to move on from him, or they're going to strictly make him a special teamer. And and if that's the case, that's the case. But this
But
regime,
you typically don't draft a special teamer high in the third round.
No, yeah. So that would probably go under the misses, right? But
right.
I don't know. I just feel like it's a different vibe with him as opposed to how it's been. He's been so much more open with the media in terms of like, hey,
yes,
this is our plan, and he's stuck to that plan.
This is what we're going to do, and we're executing.
Right. Instead of like,
we can't even answer how many years are left on our deal.
Right. And
sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's what I was going to say. Like, you're right. Like, if you can't even go out of the way to be like, yeah, hey, we gave an extension to the coach. Well, I mean, what's the point? All you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot, man. If you're trying to hide stuff from the media, especially in a market like Chicago where this is they want results, and that's why.
Oh, absolutely.
A part of me is happy that Aaron Rodgers is going to New York because he was babied and coddled with the Green Bay media, and now he's about to go and play for New York or wherever when it's officially done. but they're not going
Yes.
to coddle him, man. If he goes to New York and he's not performing, they're going to shred him, and he's going to hate every second of it. Probably have
I
to go
hope
hide
so.
in another dark room somewhere. Like, it's just insane, man.
Hide in a dark room somewhere, he says.
Under a bed or something.
You know,
who knows?
It was interesting hearing Aaron Rodgers, not to take away from our Bears, but it was interesting hearing him today on McAfee specifically say that when he went into the dark room, he felt like him and the Green Bay Packers were going to work this coming season. And then when he came out of the dark room, he felt that they wanted to move on from him. I don't know what he was doing in that dark room. Nobody will ever know. But
in a span of 2 days, he really had a big change, huh?
Big swing in 2 days. Maybe he was drinking some ayahuasca in there. Who knows? But, ultimately, it's good for the division to change things up. And I think, the Detroit Lions are obviously on an uptick. Our Bears are clearly on an uptick. The Vikings are the Vikings. Whether you love or hate Captain Kirk, they have, in my opinion, the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson. So,
yep. And I mean, the Packers now without Aaron Rodgers, I mean, it's pretty simple, right?
Packers suck.
Yes, they're going to be in last place in the division probably. Ultimately, realistically, I think it's going to be Lions, Bears, Vikings, then Packers in the division. I think the Bears will fight for that number 1 seed, but I think ultimately Detroit will probably get it just because of their depth. And Dan Campbell's a monster, not to compliment our rival too much, but I like Dan Campbell
a lot.
And, he's putting that dog mindset, so to speak, in a lot of those players. And, hopefully Coach Eberflus and the hits principle here this coming season bodes well to the development of our Chicago Bears, and we're able to see a much more improved team going into next season. I need to see a little bit more personally out of Coach Eberflus. I don't dislike him, but I'm not necessarily sold on the hits principle and everything. It's a good presentation, right? But at the end of the day, I don't think that how do I want to say this? I think Coach Eberflus is too even-keeled and level-headed. And yes, I get that you want that to an extent, but when you're losing, what was it, 8 in a row last season, 9 in a row, I want my coach to be fired up and pissed off.
Except
to an
I feel
extent.
I feel like they knew that this was the game plan when they came in. They were like, hey, if we win games, cool. If we lose games, that's even better. Like, I feel like because of just what they did, they got rid of all the top guys on the team, right?
So I should give him the benefit of the doubt for last
I would
season.
see how this season is. If they go on a freaking 10-game losing streak this year and he's just, oh yeah, we got the hits principle, blah, blah, blah. Then I'd worry. But like,
fair enough.
I don't see a scenario where they lose 10 games in a row this season. No, I don't.
I surely hope not.
I hope not too, man. I've been too many losing streaks the last few seasons. What they have 10 last year, then they had like a 6-game the year before that, and a 6-game the year before that.
So yeah, and again, that goes back to the development of this team as a whole next season. I don't see it happening. This Bears team for a 5-week stretch led the league in scoring last season.
Yep.
And lost 4 out of those 5 games.
After I tweeted, of course.
Yes, after you tweeted, because Justin Fields went to your personal Twitter and saw that he needed to step it up for Ace.
He did, and that's what they did
in
man.
A big way.
Yep. Hey,
that's your story.
I don't want to
say
to it. I don't want to say he did it for me, but he did it for me.
Good stuff as always, Ace. No, man, it's always an honor to share the airwaves with you and chalk it up when it comes to these Chicago Bears. I am excited to see what the rest of the week holds. I think depending on the moves that are made, we should do a quick recap on Sunday just to encompass what moves were made here over the next few days, because I do think we're going to see Orlando Brown in a Bears jersey. I maybe we see Slay in a Bears jersey too. That would be an excellent way to close out free agency.
Yep.
Obviously, you've got to get some help at safety still. I know people don't want to think about that, but Eddie Jackson's injury being 12 to 18 months, he's not going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season. It may be deep into the season before he's ready to go. So do we get another option at safety to help, keep that high caliber secondary? I don't know. There's not really any safeties out there of significance that we could grab in free agency, but there's always the later rounds of the draft, right? I think for us, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the general consensus is now you've got enough weapons on offense, build those trenches out offensively and defensively, get the line up to a top tier level, and then you take all of the excuses away from Justin Fields.
I agree 100%. I think so. Let me ask you, is the offense as stand right now better than it was last year?
Yes.
They were a pretty dominant team there for a good stretch in terms of putting up points, right? There were 30 plus games. I think you said 5 weeks in a row
of 30 plus points. Yes.
Yeah. And
that was without David Montgomery, right? Because he was injured. So,
and then the defense let you down, right? So you improve offensively, so you'd expect that kind of production to be there. Now, if you can get just an average defense, a couple guys that can get to the quarterback more than they were able to get to the quarterback last year, I could see a scenario where this team wins 8 games next season. And that is a big jump. From 3 to 8, that's a huge jump.
Yeah, and maybe they get lucky, 2 games go their way, and they slide into the wild card with 9 or 10 wins. I mean, realistically, this team could be a team that gets a wild card spot next season if all the cards fall in the right direction and everything clicks on all cylinders. 8 wins is very reasonable in my opinion. And as the season gets closer and we know who we're playing when, we'll go through the list just as we did last year, Ace, and give our predictions. Maybe I won't say the Bears win 12 games next season, but
no, we probably will. Like, let's be honest. We'll probably be like, oh yeah, they could beat this team. They could beat that team.
Probably be hyped enough by then. I did see a petition on change.org that has about 40,000 signatures right now for Lovie Smith to announce the draft pick.
That would be so awesome, right? Like,
that would be epic.
They should put a little monument to him to this season in the new arena. Like, back in 2022-23 season, Lovie Smith screwed the Houston Texans over and gave the Bears the number 1 overall pick, which led to this dominating team.
They just have that playing on loop where the GM from Houston's running down on the sidelines telling him not to score.
Yeah.
And then he scores and goes for 2 on 4th and 22.
Yep.
Gotta love it. No pun intended.
Love it.
We got a comment from Brent. Chill out on the predictions. Yeah, well, it's hard not to be an excited Bears fan right now, Brent.
Now, obviously, I know Brent's kind of wishy-washy when it comes to the Bears. I'm just gonna say that. Whatever.
Well, I would never be so rude as to diss our audience, Ace, but
I would.
With that being said, I think it's going to be an exciting season. Let's get through free agency. Let's get through the draft, and then we can predict how many games our Bears are going to win and lose. But ultimately, it is a much better time to be a Bears fan than it was this time 1 week ago.
Yeah, and it's it'll be fun. I think
it's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, and then next week we'll be back, and then I'm going to be at the 25th anniversary party for ESPN, which will be cool. And I'll report on how that goes, and if I happen to get Jay Cutler on the show, then I get Jay Cutler on the show. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm going there with a purpose to accidentally bump into him and be like, hey man, give me a call. Justin Fields is watching my Twitter. I can only, be like, hey, Cuddy, look what happened when Fields and I were in communication. Now it's yours and my time here.
Best of luck with that, my friend.
Yep.
Thank you guys for joining us as always right here on the Undefeated Sports Network. It is going to be a action-packed next few days, hopefully, for our Bears. So Ace and I will be back next week to recap that. And let's see what happens here in the coming days, guys. It is an exciting time to be a Bears fan. Again, thank you for joining us right here on Sport Court. We appreciate each and every one of you. If you are not already, please be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe to our groups on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. You can click that notification bell and see us every time that we go live. We appreciate the support as always, guys, and have a good night.